Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. Ring with a harmonies of liberty. Let all rejoicing, let it rise high as the listening skies. Let us march on, let us march on, till victory is won.
Welcome to the 29th Annual Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Community Celebration. Although this event will look a little different than our past celebrations, this difference does not diminish the message and the challenge to us all. During the year 2020, we as a nation found our lives impacted by two crises. In early March, we were confronted with a global COVID-19 pandemic, and amid the pandemic, we as a nation were forced to confront a crisis of ongoing social injustice that saw the deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor as galvanizing forces for awareness and action. And to add to this unprecedented year, we saw the passing of an American icon, an American hero, Congressman John Lewis. We will pay tribute to the late Congressman throughout today's program. During this event, you will hear a message of reflection, a message of responsibility, and a message of hope. You will hear from young activists who are leaders working to tear down the barriers that divide us. And we will acknowledge the hard work of our local healthcare workers and our volunteers. Watching the events unfold over the past few months, I've reflected on our history as a nation and the reality that it has been nearly 60 years since Dr. King's assassination, and yet, sadly, his message is still relevant today. Last fall, I heard Dr. Robert Murphy, Ohio University Patton College alumnus and administrator with the Columbus City Schools, speak during a virtual Black Lives Matter event. Dr. Murphy said, and I quote, "You can't have systemic change unless you first have individual change." My hope for all of us is that we become less interested in idolizing Dr. King and his principles, and more interested in putting his principles into action, creating some good trouble, as the late Congressman would say. President Obama recently said that we can have fierce disagreements and yet recognize each other's common humanity. I'm asking you to imagine what would happen if we came together under our common humanity and celebrated all that we are and can be. The challenge is ours. Thank you for joining us, and enjoy the program.
We are one people with one family. We all live in the same house, and through books, through information, we need to find a way to say to people, we must lay down the burden of hate, because hate is too heavy a burden to bear.
Our country is so divided, and it's divided in which a way that I have not seen for decades. It's like underlining there were always things that were there because we understand that racism is systemic. It's not something that happened overnight. it doesn't always have to do with just the little things we see, like education and being able to go to a certain restaurants. It's much more extensive than that. It has to do with the fact that sometimes you're not able to live in the places that you wanted to live, or to go to the places that you wanted to go. And if there was a somewhat of, they used to call it a glass ceiling when it had to do with men and women trying to get equal pay with jobs that men, the same job that men would do. Well, in that whole spectrum of, say we have the male Caucasian, and then beside him we have the female Caucasian, then we have below that the African American male, and then at the very bottom we have the female African American. And that's how we've always had to struggle from the bottom up, from everything that we've had to do. Well, now we hear people say and do things, especially from the top, that we really didn't hear as vocally as we do now. But the people had to have had that feeling in the very beginning for it to come forward the way it has now. I mean, we've had people that things that you never thought, the disrespect, the anger, the hatred like we see now. We have not seen that in many, many years, and not to this point. We have a group of young people, and well, it's a mixture. It's a mixture of all kinds of people. Under the Black Lives Matter, a lot of people didn't like that. They didn't like what it stood for. They didn't like the way people did things. But sometimes you can be pushed down so far that the only thing you can do is to push forward. And this is what it has come to be. It's like the area, and I do remember the 60s when we had the race riots. Now, we didn't really have them here, but I did have an opportunity to visit other places who did have them. They did experience them. After so long, people cannot be pushed down. And we've reached that boiling point in our country. If you don't have a voice, if you're discouraged and you're cut off at every turn, the only thing you can do is to push out. And that's what's occurring now. But the great thing about this movement is it's not just African Americans, it's all kinds of people. It's all kinds of people who are moving forward and working together. And that is the only way that it can change, is if we all unify and work together in a single movement. If people don't talk, see, people don't want to talk about, I don't want to talk about that. I don't remember. And that's on both sides. We have African Americans that don't want to talk about the bad times.
Yep.
But you have to talk. If you don't talk, you'll never heal. If you don't remember and continue along with those bad memories, they're beautiful memories. So you don't want to throw everything and shove it back. There was an old saying, and you've probably heard it, or maybe not in your household, but someone else's. What happens in this house stays in this house. Well, what happens in the Black community doesn't have to stay in the Black community. You need to let it out, and everyone needs to sit down and talk about it.
It was Congressman John Lewis who once said, "A democracy cannot thrive where power remains unchecked and justice is reserved for a select few." Ignoring these cries and failing to respond to this movement is simply not an option. For peace cannot exist where justice is not served.
Coming to this country and experiencing racism was a shock to me. I don't think as an immigrant you ever prepared for that kind of experience. I remember telling a student in a class one time, and I said, I didn't know what racism was until I came to this country. And that was true. there are other forms of injustice and discrimination all over the world. So, I mean, discrimination is not unique to the American society. But for me, racism, it's something that I experienced here that I had never experienced before coming to this country. And first of all, it makes you begin to question who you are, right? Your own capabilities. You begin to doubt and second guess yourself in terms of your contribution to society. And we all want to fit in. I mean, it doesn't matter where you go. You want to belong. You want to make sure, at least pretend that you're quote unquote home. But when you're always a stranger everywhere you go, it doesn't matter where you go, you're always a stranger. It's a little bit unsettling. It's unsettling. But then you also learn to rise above, right? Which is, always fun. One of the things I think the gift my mom gave me, and my dad as well, is to always define myself. It doesn't matter what the environment is. It doesn't matter what people around me are doing. It is still up to me to define who I am and what contribution I want to make in society. It is harder, don't get me wrong. It is very, very hard, but it still can be done. And I think that's really, when I wake up in the morning, I ask myself, okay, who can I help today, right? What kind of contribution do I want to make today? And those become my mantra. And I try to accomplish those. Some days I fail, some days it's okay. But at the end of the day, I ask myself, did you try your best today? And if the answer is yes, okay, I go to bed happy. And I wake up in the morning and I try again. So yeah, it's been a journey for me. It's been a journey, but I've also learned a lot. And I think through all the experiences, some of them not so good, and some of them very good, you learn to appreciate yourself, and you learn to appreciate your fellow human beings. And we are all God's children. We may all look different, and nobody looks the same, right? We all look different. It doesn't matter where you come from. And I think that God, in his infinite wisdom, chose to make us to look different, right? He could have made all of us look the same. Have we ever wondered that? Why God did not make us look the same? There's a reason for that, and there's a purpose to it. And the reason, from my perspective, is that we all bring different things to the table. And those are the different things that help enrich humanity, right? And make life meaningful and enjoyable for everybody. Dr. King, he didn't have to do anything. And I think that's what people forget, in raising my children is in February. Everybody wants to do something about it's Black History Month. I say Black History Month doesn't happen, any other time, but, February or January when we celebrate Dr. King. Dr. King didn't have to do anything. I mean, his life was pretty made, right? He could have just gone to school, inherited his grandfather's church and preached, and probably wouldn't have died early. But he saw what was going on in society, and he recognized the fact that, well, his life may not have been as hard as other people's lives around him, but he was still part of that society. And I'm sure it wasn't an easy choice for him to make. He had families he had to protect, right? He has little children, he had a wife, but he chose to be the change he expected from others. And I think that is one thing my students recognize, the fact that he didn't have to do it. It was a choice. And I'm thinking that the reason he chose to make a difference was because it was important to him. I don't think he wanted to be a hero either, right? I think that's partly what people forget. I don't think Martin Luther King wanted to die young and to leave his 4 children to grow up without him. I don't think he wanted to be a hero and leave his, wife. But he had an opportunity to serve, and he was willing to serve. And if it cost him his life, then so be it. And I think today, we all need to ask ourselves, what's my role, right? What's my value to society? And it doesn't have to be the whole of the United States as, Dr. King, made an impact, but wherever we are, in your family, at school, you have a role to play. What is that role? Can you figure out what that is? And then do it. And it doesn't have to resemble anybody's. Dr. King's path did not resemble any other person's path. He basically, designed his own path as he saw fit to fulfill his calling. And as an individual, we all have to do that for ourselves. Now that's what his journey and his legacy means to me, is asking myself, what's my role, right? I think earlier you had asked me why I got interested in this topic. And I think it comes from that, There's a reason why I'm here, right? What's that? And I know God has given me talents, skills. How does He want me to use that? And for everybody it's different, but we all have to ask ourselves those questions and then ask Him for grace to help us to live our best lives and to serve His people the way He wants us to. I hope we can find a way to love each other again. And I'm guilty, right? I'm very guilty because we can get lost in the minutiae of who said what, who's on the right side, who's on the left side, who's in the middle. But at the end of the day, we have to recognize that we're all human beings. And respect each other. Recognize the fact that we don't all have to agree, right? Part of the reason I became an English major, I go back to that. And, people ask me, how did you become an English major? It's really weird. I read 19th century British poetry by Shelley. It took me to a different place. This is a white, dead man who lived 300 years ago. The beauty of his music and the beauty of his poetry spoke to me. And that allowed me to find myself and to begin to ask questions that then led me on my journey to other people, including African American authors and African authors and so on, right? But without that essential humanity that I recognize in his work, I probably wouldn't be an English major, right? So as a human being, we all have a lot to offer each other. We need to find that thing that makes us human, that allows us to communicate with each other as human beings. Forget the politics. Sometimes, I'm pretty set in my views and my own political views, but sometimes I also wonder, am I really right? Am I saying it the right way? Having the capability to ask questions and to recognize that no one person holds the truth should help us to transcend the division. But I'm scared. I don't think I've lived in this country for 35 years, but I've never been as scared for my own personal safety as I've been within the last 2 years. I'm driving and I'm looking around me. I'm at a grocery store, I'm looking around me. I haven't done that. That's really sad. It is very sad. But we need to find ways to love each other again. And the only way we can do that is to pretty much recognize that we're human beings. And I come back to we are all God's children. And look at it this way, if we are God's children, right? If you are God's child, I'm God's child. How do you think God wants me to treat you? Right? If you're a daughter of the Most High God, how does He want me to treat you? I think we need to ask that question. How does He want you to treat me? If we can ask ourselves that question, then maybe we can just basically forget all these things and find ways we can work together. And then disagree. We can't agree, but understanding that at the end of the day, those things don't matter. What matters is the essential humanity and the world God has created for all of us to enjoy. But yeah, it's an important question. I don't have the answers really, but that's what I think.
Children cry for bread. Forget it, Lord, that justice out in tatters, cold and dead. Outside these walls run desperate streets where greed is all and right. We bar the doors, refuse to see or hear the words we say. Let justice roll like a river, like a river, let it roll. Justice roll like a river, let it roll. Convict us, Lord, we dance and laugh, ignoring those who weep. Correct us, Lord, our golden calf has lulled our hearts to sleep. The gap between the rich and poor grows even wider, shore to shore. There's racial hate, religious war, and wolves among the sheep. Let justice roll like a river, let it roll. Let justice roll like a river, let it roll. Let justice roll like a river, let it roll. Let justice roll like a river, let it roll. Indwell us, Lord, and purify our hands to work for you. Enlist us, Lord, to serve nearby and cross the waters too. Your image bearers on the earth will never know how much they're worth. Unless we love and help you first and show the way to you. Let justice roll like a river, let it roll. Let justice roll like a river, let it roll. Let justice roll like a river, let it roll. Let justice roll like a river, let it roll. Let justice roll like a river, let it roll. Let justice roll like a river, let it roll. Let justice roll like a river, let it roll. Let justice roll like a river, let justice roll like a river, let it roll. Let justice roll like a river, let it roll. Let justice roll like a river, let it roll. Let justice roll like a river, let it roll.
Take a long, hard look down the road you'll have to travel once you've made a commitment to work for change. Know that this transformation will not happen right away. Change often takes time. It rarely happens all at once. In the movement, we didn't know how history would play itself out. When we were getting arrested and waiting in jail or standing in unmovable lines on the courthouse steps, we didn't know what would happen, but we knew it had to happen.
I'm sure this is not, not the reason or cause. One thing I do remember, and I remember my parents instilling this in me, that in this life human beings, I think, have an innate desire, for whatever reason, to be better than someone else. Okay? And let's see how I can tactfully say this. I think in some degrees, well, we know from our history, but in the Deep South, I think the black person, the black man or woman, were seen not their equal. And I'm not talking about whether we had water fountains with colored, where you specified water fountains, or in restaurants, and I'm talking about the just, and people had and I think really part of that has to do with education. And I don't want to make a blanket general statement here, but I do remember, and I remember parents sharing that with me, that some of the most biased, difficult racial hatred were by groups of people who were, and this is a judgment, I guess, but were not as informed educationally. Am I making sense? And because of lack and because of certain people's lack themselves and their feelings of inadequacy, they have to find someone else to be able to feel that they stand above them. And there was a lot of that going on. I think Dr. King was the hero. He was not only a profound man of God, but he was a very down-to-earth, as my father related with his personal relationship with him. And I think that I do believe firmly that he was a man sent from God. He had a special calling and a special mantle placed upon him. And he was not only a modern-day prophet, but he was the social conscience, not only for, I think he was the social conscience in that period for our whole nation. I remember the day coming home in carpool from elementary school when we first heard the assassination of John Kennedy and the assassinations that occurred through that period. And I know, not to state any political preference necessary, that my parents were very proud, so tragically impacted by the assassination, but proud that Lyndon Johnson, when he was elected, because he had a strong commitment to continuing what the voter rights, and my mom and dad witnessed the lining up for the first voter registration there in Selma. And I think a lot of Christian people were hurt by what was going on. But it is also, I have to say, it is like today. I find it difficult in my heart to understand why, quite frankly, and I'm going to say this as a minister, quite frankly, some upstanding Christian people take the attitude that they do now. And that to me is very, very reflective of what was going on, not only in Selma, Alabama, but across the nation from 1961 to 1966. And very, very, it's terrible that, I'm not going to say I think we're beyond that, but I am just absolutely astounded where we are today. The advice I would give is to be bold, to speak out. I think, and I'm speaking as someone I'm 67, and my generations and the generations where we've made a lot of mistakes. And it's time for healing, and I think our future is in our younger generation. My daughter, she's 33, and she does not see in her heart. She sees what's happening and everything, but she does not see this separation at all. And she She does not see through the lens that I grew up. And I think that's where the future is. And as far as, and I think the rights that we have here in the United States of America, I think protest is important. That's why historically, where would we be today if it had not been for, and of course, Dr. King always spoke of peaceable protest. And I think we're going to have to be very careful as we go into the future to call out and recognize, regardless of which spectrum you're on, where radicalism is hurting the cause for everyone. And I think that I feel good that the younger generation that I know that realize that whether it's Black Lives Matter or whether it's, and I mean, I'll not mention the other, but how, you know, we got to realize that some of this agitation, and I think peaceful protest is important, and I think young people, I think the younger generations coming on, I would hope that they could, and of course they have the lens of their parents and everything, but I would hope that there would be enough of our younger generations that would be able to experience what I experienced through parents or older mentors that can share with them not only the importance for them to be very proactive, but to realize that this is not good. That's great. And our future depends upon it. Absolutely.
In the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends.
I have decided to stick with love. Hate is too great a burden to bear.
We must accept finite disappointment, but never lose infinite hope.
Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that.
I'm convinced that men hate each other because they fear each other. They fear each other because they don't know each other. And they don't know each other because they don't communicate with each other. They don't communicate with each other because they are separated from each other.
Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
There can be no deep disappointment where there is not great love.
Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter.
The function of education is to teach one to think intensively and to think critically. Intelligence plus character, that is the goal of true education.
If you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward.
A riot is the language of the unheard.
We are prone to judge success by the index of our salaries or the size of our automobiles rather than by the quality of our service and relationship to mankind.
This is no time to engage
in the luxury of cooling off
or to take the tranquilizing
drug of gradualism.
Now is the time
to lift our nation
from the quicksands
of racial injustice
to the solid rock of brotherhood.
Now is the time
to make justice a reality
for all of God's children.
Ours is not the struggle of one day, or 1 week, or 1 year. Ours is not the struggle of one judicial appointment or presidential term. Ours is the struggle of a lifetime, or even many lifetimes. And each one of us, in every generation, must do our part. Congressman John Lewis.
My name is Leslie Sebastian. I'm 18 and I recently graduated from Ashland High School. I now attend Transylvania University where I'm majoring in international affairs. and I have the goal of going to law school after undergrad, and I hope to hold political office in the future.
My name's Austin Johnson, and and I'm from South Point, Ohio. I graduated from South Point High School in 2019. I've spent my years since I can remember, since 15 years old, fighting for social change and equality. Something I feel really strong about and passionate for because I'm the future and my kids will be the future. So that's something that I take full responsibility and full anything about. It's just something I'm constantly fighting for.
Yeah, my name is Reese Steger. I am a 2018 graduate of Ironton High School. I'm 20 years old right now. I'm attending Western Governors University for elementary education.
What does Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. mean to you?
Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to me, it's everything. He's paved the way for me, just from voting to equal rights to equal opportunities. And he's made me realize nonviolence is the key to change. And I used to be more of a Malcolm X person, by any means necessary. And if somebody hits you, you hit them back. I ain't gonna sit there, but I've realized that through the past years, I'm more of a Martin Luther King person now, because nonviolence is the key to creating change. And just, if you are truly showing yourself and portraying yourself as the nonviolent person, you can change anything. History will remember that. The photos that were captured of you will remember that. And I think that it matters. Show yourself being nonviolent, show yourself being peaceful, and you will create change. And that's exactly what we saw happen with Dr. King.
I aspire to reach his level of poise. In short, I admire Dr. King for his integrity and true grit in leading one of the most influential movements in our country's history. He represents an imperfect man who knew what needed to be done. He had the willingness to take on the risk of being a martyr, and he died fighting for those who couldn't fight for themselves. I think the Black Lives Matter movement's current leaders and supporters can take a lot away from Dr. King in terms of promoting positive change.
So Martin Luther King, he's obviously an inspiring civil rights leader. He's an amazing man. He's changed the world in more ways than we can count. And, you know, his methods to bring peace and understanding while fighting the biggest fight, human rights, like it's the biggest fight of all, you know, equality. Part of that, it's the biggest fight. To me, he means community and pride, power, effectiveness. He's shown that, like, when together as a community, the pride and power of a peaceful demonstration of common goal to stop oppression in general, it's effective and it does reach people.
So how do we tear down these walls, these barriers? How do we have the uncomfortable conversations? What can we do as a society, or you guys do as the next generation who is using their voice to make change? What can be done to kind of bridge the divide between us?
You know, there's multiple ways of doing it, by having civil conversations, organizing nonviolent events, organizing events in the community, talking to a neighbor, making a donation, using social media. And that's the thing I want to say is, your protests don't have to start in the street. It can start in your bedroom, in your house, on the couch, at the pool, at a friend's house. It can start anywhere. You have the power to use social media in any way you want to convey your message. And that's why I want to say is, if somebody asks you what to do or how to do it, how are we going to do this? We do it by that. We do it by using our voices, by taking a stand and fighting for things that are morally right. And just, like I said, having the uncomfortable conversations. We have to have those uncomfortable conversations to create change, because if we don't, then how do you know what is racist and what's not?
Absolutely, Austin. So I think that for the barriers, we need to recognize the barriers. We need to identify the barriers. We need to understand what causes them, and we need to understand how to tear them down. So I talked about redlining districts before. They were used nearly 100 years ago in the 1930s, and they still serve as barriers. It is known that they serve as barriers, and there is nothing that has been done about them. It is the job of our legislators to tear down these barriers. There's also a barrier in the education system. Our teachers do not fully, and I do not blame our teachers, I blame the programs that are put in place, what the teachers are told to teach. They're not fully teaching students the severity of racial issues. They're downplayed. I know that slavery was severely downplayed just because of what I've seen on social media, and how bad it truly was. And also in our healthcare systems, there's a huge barrier in our healthcare system. A lot of people still believe today that African Americans have a higher pain tolerance than white Americans. And this was a myth from the days of slavery, whenever they did experimental medical practices on African Americans, and they justified these painful procedures by saying that, oh, they have a higher pain tolerance. So I think that these barriers still need to be recognized, and they need to be identified, and we need to figure out how to solve these problems. And it probably will be through our government, but I think it's important for us to call our legislators and demand change.
Yeah, I think it does have to do a lot with the government doing what their job was just meant to be. But from a social aspect, you know, the barriers do need to be turned into bridges. Instead of focusing on differences that divide us, you know, we should be focusing on ways to build common interests and goals. You know, spending time together to find the things that unite us as a community, that they can help break down all these stereotypes and assumptions that we all have about each other. And I mean, you know, everyone does. You walk down the street and you can see who's friends with who hangs out with who. You go to schools, you go anywhere you go, you know. But these are the barriers that are really in the way. Who's to say that I shouldn't sit at this lunch table because these people hang out together and they don't hang out with me, or they don't, you know, who's to say this? These are the barriers that start all of it. When you're younger and your kids are like, I don't want to sit with this person. Well, sit with them anyways, because you're making the barriers now.
Thank you, Reese Stager. Thank you, Austin Johnson. And thank you, Laney Sebastian, for taking time out today to have this conversation. I think, Austin, you said good trouble, and you reminded me that Representative Lewis, that was his statement. So thank you guys for going out there and making some good trouble.
Step back, cloud yourself with wonder. Oh, little child, you've got too much ahead. Get yourself up, hard times will bring you under, but you'll be fine, just like your mama said. 'Cause I'm feeling satisfactory. You made this feeling in a factory. Some days I ain't so sure, like I can't go no more. So what am I good for? Just what am I good for? Back, 'cause there will be another in a little while, then you can try again. Take your eyes off someone that makes you wonder. You can say goodbye just like you should have said. 'Cause I'm feeling satisfactory. They made this feeling in a factory. Some days I ain't so sure, like I can't go no more. So what am I good for? You can tell me any day, just what am I good for? And joy comes with sunrise in the morning, weeping through the night. And this thing for sure won't last forever, we'll be just fine. And joy comes with sunrise in the morning, weeping through the night. And this thing for sure won't last forever, we'll be just fine. 'Cause I'm feeling satisfactory. They made this feeling in a factory. Some days I ain't so sure, like I can't go no more. So what am I good for? You can tell me now. So what am I good for? You can tell me any day. So what am I good for?
Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining our celebration of Martin Luther King Jr. I'm Haley Haugen. I'm a professor of English at Ohio University Southern, and each year I have the honor of creating the prompts for our contest and coordinating the judging. This year, we challenge students to write a poem on a contemporary social topic, something involving peace or protest, because we've seen these things in the news a lot this year. And we were hoping the students would write on something that they thought would get Dr. King's attention if he were still alive today. And as King would do in his writing, we encouraged the students to make use of a variety of creative writing techniques to help broaden their audience, to capture their readers' attention, and to inspire their readers to make a difference in the world. And I think you will agree that our young writers tonight who will be sharing their work with you have done just that. So before I introduce our prize-winning writers who will be reading their poems, I'm happy to introduce you to one of the teachers whose students participated in the challenge. And this is Ms. Rhonda Williams from Ironton Middle School. And Ms. Williams, I know you have your students participate in whether it's poetry or essay each year. I know your classes are always greatly involved, so we appreciate that. And I want to thank you for taking the time to encourage these young writers, because it's so important and so much fun. So I do have a question for Ms. Williams, and that is, what did you do in the classroom to help prepare the students to write poetry this year? And also, the prompt was a little different since we've had all of these incidents in the news. Did the prompt focusing on peace and protest lead to any interesting conversations in the classroom?
I'll answer your second question first, and that is, yes, there was some discussion about the peace and protest, and it was a very easy discussion because the students had been involved with the news and had concerns and opinions. So that discussion led to creating a list of all the types of social issues going on that may or may not have involved protests, but they were still issues. After we had that list compiled with some discussion, then we started looking at a timeline of Martin Luther King Jr. and going down through all of the protests that went on during his lifetime and what he was involved in and how he very much believed in peaceful protest. And then, of course, we needed to look at some figurative language and poetic technique, as well as some poems that we found on other social topics that have been written in the past.
Hey, great. Thank you so much. It sounds like it was a really great opportunity for your class. And again, thanks for doing that. Okay, good. Before I introduce our winning writers, I did also want to take a moment to recognize a number of other writers from Ms. Williams' class who received honorable mentions for our contest. And those writers are Destiny Bledsoe, Grant Day, Ian Ginger, Adriana Hurd, Abigail Eisen, and Mason Phillips. So congratulations to all of you for writing some standout poems. There really was just a great batch of poems, and I enjoyed reading them so much. Now I'm happy to introduce our prize winners who will share their poems with us. And I've also encouraged them to tell us a little bit about what inspired their work. And our first reader tonight won our third place prize. This is Claire Southard from Fairland. And the title of her poem is I Have a Dream Today. Welcome, Claire.
Hello. Would you like me to start talking about the poem or just read the poem now?
You can tell us what inspired you.
Okay, so what inspired me was, well, to be totally honest, in the time we are in right now, I realized that even though this would be a really common topic to base the poem on, it was a very important and meaningful one. I have a dream today. I have a dream I wish to share, so please just let me say, listen to the words I speak. I have a dream today. A dream of hope, a dream of peace for this world to listen to. Take it and ponder it, and don't just think of you. A picking up the pieces dream with all the broken glass, where many tread upon dreams of the past. A paving the road for many dream, better lives and better living, where no one here is selfish and everyone is giving. Look past the differences that cause a lot of chatter. The simple things, minor things, do they really matter? I have a dream I wish to share, so please just let me say, listen to the words I speak. I have a dream today.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Claire. Thank you. Our next reader is our second place winner is Annika McCowan from Ironton Middle School with her poem, I Can't Breathe. Welcome, Annika.
Hi. So I originally had the idea to base it off the killing of George Floyd, but it eventually, as I started just writing and trying to read up on it more, it just kind of turned into more of like us as a community, us as a people, and us as a country versus just one event. So, yeah. I can't breathe. Help me, please. Stop. I can't breathe. People are outraged. An undeserving man dead. $20 fake. The news has spread. A horrendous mistake. I can't breathe. We are awake. Violence on the streets. Protests. I need a break. I can't breathe. Shooting. Police defunding. What is happening to our country? I can't breathe. Why must it be this way? We were climbing, now we're falling, further down into this dark abyss. We were swimming, now we're sinking, further down away from the surface. We were flying, now free falling, the surface nears. Everything is dark, everything is silent, everything is finally at peace. I can't breathe.
Hey, thank you so much. Thank you. And our first place winner of the contest, among, again, so many wonderful poems, is Emily Ferguson from Fairland Middle School with her poem, Poetry of Protest, Black Lives Matter. Welcome, Emily.
Hi. So I mainly got my inspiration from what happened over the summer and how a lot of people were protesting for change, and that change needs to happen. And I wrote about what happened with George Floyd and how racism has been a subject that people seem to want to avoid, but it still exists and we need to address it and get rid of it instead of pretend that it's not there. I have a dream, he said. His dream hasn't come true yet. He wished for equality and opportunity. He imagined a world of fairness and unity. Yet there is still discrimination, but it will stop with my generation. We are still fighting for King's dream, and we will not stop until it's achieved. Protesting, making sure our voices are heard, is the only way to get the change that's deserved. Some will say that we can't be serious. They say that we are crazy, delirious. Wanting a change, wanting a better world, isn't crazy and it isn't wrong. What's wrong is that some are okay with this, okay that racism still exists. My heart aches for the victims who were killed all because of a twisted system. Men who swore to protect them murdered them instead. Demanding change, demanding justice for those who died, some completely innocent. We fight for the safety of people of color so they don't feel like they have no power. Racism was a glass dangerously close to the edge. The murder of George Floyd shoved it clear off the ledge. It shattered on the floor, erupting in protests and chaos. Some tried shoving it under the rug, hoping the issue would die off. The protesters now are trying to clean it, getting rid of the problem so it's no longer present. Sweeping racism under the rug won't hide its existence. It will just stay there hidden until someone notices. Some people say that Black lives have always mattered, but they know what's been done even after the glass shattered. This issue had been hidden for such a long time, but now it's been brought back into the spotlight. If Black lives have mattered for a while, then why have they been racially profiled? Policemen saw the color of their skin, thought of them as dangerous, even the children. But we fight for their lives now. We are making MLK proud. But Black lives matter now, and they will forever, because we won't let our differences get between us, never. Racism still exists now, but it doesn't have to. King's dream is still possible, so let's make it come true. Let's fight for the world MLK dreamed of, a world of equality, opportunity, fairness, and love.
Okay, thank you, Emily. Thank you all for being here and sharing your work and remembering Dr. King in this way. And congratulations again on being our prize winners. I definitely want to encourage you all to stay engaged with social matters, with the work of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and of course, to keep writing poems. Thank you so much.
On February 4th, 1968, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his last sermon at Ebenezer Baptist Church. The sermon was entitled The Drum Major Instinct, and it was inspired by Mark 10:43. Whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant. Dr. King, inspired by this, said the following: if you want to be important, wonderful. If you want to be recognized, wonderful. If you want to be great, wonderful. But recognize that he who is greatest among you shall also be your servant.
And Dr. King continues, that's a new definition of greatness. And this morning, the thing that I like about it, by giving that definition of greatness, it means that everybody can be great because everybody can serve. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to make your subject and your verb agree to serve. You don't have to know about Plato and Aristotle to serve. You don't have to know Einstein's theory of relativity to serve. You don't have to know the second theory of thermodynamics and physics to serve. You only need a heart full of grace, a soul generated by love, and you can be that servant.
It's with Dr. King's words in defining greatness that we acknowledge and celebrate all who've made a difference during this health crisis. This includes former Ohio University Southern, College Credit Plus, South Point High School 2020 graduate Lucy Gannon, who organized a blood drive in May 2020. Lucy said, I wanted to help, and one of the only ways I saw for me to do so was to host a blood drive. I knew that would allow for me to help beyond just my community. This gives me an opportunity to help my country in the best way I know how. We also saw a servant heart in Chandler Falks, a 2018 Ohio University Southern graduate of the Associate Degree in Nursing program. At the beginning of the pandemic, Chandler said, I knew I wanted to help carry the burden of this terrible pandemic. She traveled to New York, the epicenter of the outbreak. She admitted to being terrified, but stated, I know this is where God wants me to be, to either help save lives or hold someone's hand as they take their last breath. With an attitude of grace, area first responders, doctors, nurses, and volunteers have worked tirelessly to keep us healthy, safe, and informed. That is why, as we honor Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his commitment of service to one another, we simply say, thank you.
I just want to say thank you to all the first responders. If it wasn't for you guys, not all of us would have the chance to be sitting here today And during this whole COVID crisis, some of us might have not made it out alive. So I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Today, as we do each year, we celebrate the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Today, we have reflected on Dr. King's words and deeds, and we hope that you have added to your education and understanding of his words, mission, and purpose. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "It seems that education has a twofold function to perform in the life of man and in society. The one is utility, and the other is culture. Education must enable one to sift and weigh evidence, to discern the true from the false, the real from the unreal, and the facts from the fiction." When I think of the phrase twofold function, I think of the word purpose. The Webster Dictionary defines purpose as the reason for which something is done or created, or for which something exists. Another way to view purpose is through the words of the late Chadwick Boseman, forever known as the Black Panther. In his class of 2018 commencement speech at Howard University, he said, "Purpose crosses disciplines. Purpose is an essential element of you. It is the reason you are on the planet at this particular time in history." Today, I challenge you to find your purpose and to find that essential element that makes you the person you are. I also challenge you to connect. Today, you connected with young leaders and wise elders and community members representing a diverse example of human beings. You have heard stories of purpose and hope. The youth in our community are discovering their purpose through action, and the elders in our community have shared their purpose through their words. Today, we challenge you to find your voice and act on your purpose and connect. Gene Roddenberry, the creator of the Star Trek universe, said, "In a very real sense, we are all aliens on a strange planet. We spend most of our time reaching out and trying to communicate. If during our lifetime we could reach and really communicate with just 2 people, we are indeed very fortunate."
So we've come here today, traumatized with shameful conditions.
Power to the people! Power to the people!
Freedom is inextricably bound to our freedom. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We have also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now.
the words of the great Senator John Lewis, you are a light. You are the light. Never let anyone, any person, or any force dampen, dim, or diminish your light. Release the need to hate, to harbor division, and the enticement of revenge. Release all bitterness, hold only love, only peace in your heart, knowing that the battle of good to overcome evil is already won. Hello, I'm Christy Barnes, and I am chair of the Ohio University Southern Campus Council on Diversity and Inclusion, and a faculty member in psychology. Senator Lewis's words are a reminder of Dr. King's legacy. While their work and that of those who spearheaded the civil rights movement is not yet complete, we will continue to be the light. We have a responsibility to shine our light where there is injustice and inequality. We will continue to shine our light until there is no darkness and no more inequality. I want to thank all of those who contributed their time and their talents to creating this beautiful program. I also want to thank Ohio University, the Southern Campus, Mr. Robert Pleasant, and the Diversity and Inclusion Council for making programs like these possible. I would like to give a special thanks to Ernie Hall and the Electronic Media Department, who spent hours editing and compiling this program so that it could be delivered virtually. Finally, I want to thank all of you for joining us in this event. We're going to end our program with Ohio University's own Dr. J.W. Smith and his rendition of America.
Wow, what a time in which we live. But as I do this in foyer, think about all those service people and first responders out there. Oh, beautiful, for he was proved in a liberating strife. Yeah. Who more than self, thank God, their country loved, and mercy more than life. Yeah. America, sweet America. Ooh. May God thy gold refine, yes sir, till all success. Shall it be nobleness, oh yeah, and every gain divine. You know, when I was in school, well, we said it like this. Oh, beautiful, for spacious skies, war amber waves of grain. Look out, look out. For purple mountains, purple mountain majesties. Above the fruited plain. Now wait a minute. You see, I'm talking about America, sweet America. You know, my God, He done shed His grace on thee. You ought to love Him today, y'all, because He crowned that good. Yeah, He did. Say with brother, good Lord, from a sea to shining sea. Oh, you ought to sing that with me if you can. Oh, America, sweet America. shining sea. Oh, I thank you, Lord. See the shining sea, yeah. Shine.